I've hauled everything from silver bars to slaughtered hogs across the dust-choked veins of the frontier, but the job that near tore my soul in two started on a Tuesday cloudless, dry and humming with dread. Red Mesa was the kind of town that looked like it had a secret under every floorboard. When my coach creaked to a stop, I thought I smelled blood in the wind, though maybe that was just the tannery. I was supposed to drop off goods and move on, but that's when I met Silas Haywood, the man who changed the course of my life with. Nothing but a smile and a handshake. Silas looked like the type of man who never let mud touch his boots. Crisp vest, silver cufflinks, and a voice so smooth I didn't realize I was agreeing to the job until my hand was already around the sealed ledger. "All I need," he said, "is for you to deliver this to Marshal Tannen in Dry Fork Junction. Straight run, no detours. You're the only man I trust." I'd heard of Tannen. Straight-edge lawman liked his justice quiet and final. Silas didn't say what was in the ledger, and I didn't ask, at least not right away. But as I rode out of town with the sun dying behind me, that wax-sealed book burned a hole in the saddlebag. He said he trusted me, but there was something off in his eyes. They were bright, yes, but too bright. Like the way glass looks before it shatters. I camped that night under a gnarled mesquite tree. Couldn't sleep. The fire crackled low. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the stars blinked like they knew something I didn't. Curiosity clawed at me till I finally pulled the ledger out. The wax seal was thick, red, stamped with a crest I didn't recognize. I held it to the firelight, turning it in my hands. A voice inside said, "Don't," but something stronger whispered, "You already agreed to deliver it? Don't you want to know what's inside?" I broke the seal. The smell hit me first: old leather, faint ink, and something else, like rust. The first few pages were blank, then came lists. Names, dozens, each line neatly written, each name followed by a red X crossed out in thick strokes of crimson ink. Some had notes. "Owes debt. Spoke against the Haywoods. Stole during the famine." One had a single word beside it: "Unforgiven." I turned the pages faster, my pulse hammering. The weight of it pressed on me like I was holding something toxic. This wasn't a business ledger. It was a list, a reckoning. Suddenly, this wasn't a delivery. It was a damn message. That night I barely slept. I kept staring at the sealed envelope tucked in the front pouch addressed to Marshal Tannen. My hands itched to open it too, but I held back. I felt like a man dragging a corpse across state lines without realizing it. By dawn, I knew I had to see more before I handed this book over. I'd been trusted to deliver something, but what if trusting me meant dragging others to the noose? Whatever this ledger was, it wasn't done speaking. The desert at night has a way of whispering your own guilt back to you. As I rode on, that ledger felt heavier with each mile, like it was soaking up the lives written in it. I told myself I'd just glance again, just enough to ease my nerves. But the truth is, I couldn't stop. We camped beneath a ridge of limestone, the horses restless, the fire burning low. I opened the book again, turning to a page with thicker ink, like someone wrote it in a rage. My eyes scanned the line, and then I froze. Jeb Hawkins. I hadn't spoken that name out loud in over a decade. The ledger had it in bold letters, but it was the note beside it that hollowed me out. Presumed dead. Still owed blood. My gut turned to stone. Jeb and I had ridden together back in '62, during the Salt River famine. We shared smokes, firelight, and near death more times than I can count. He was a stubborn bastard, smart, loyal, hard to kill. Then he vanished. Everyone figured he got caught up in some border raid or died drunk in a ditch, but I never believed it. Now here was his name, not only still alive in someone's memory, but hunted, crossed out. Something cracked inside me. What kind of man keeps a list of the dead and still calls it unfinished? I flipped back through the pages, slower this time, and what I saw chilled me worse than any desert night. There weren't just names, there were stories. Small notes in The margins written like grudges. One name had laughed when father starved. Another took mother's ring from corpse. The names weren't random. They were targets, that sealed letter to the Marshal. What if it wasn't a plea for justice? What if it was an invitation? A call to arms? A list of those Silas wanted. Hunted down under color of law? My hand shook. I closed the ledger and leaned back against my saddle, staring at the stars like they could tell me what to do. I thought of Jeb's laugh, sharp and reckless. The time he took a bullet for me. The way he'd talked about starting a little ranch by the foothills someday. Had he done it? Was he out there somewhere, living quiet? Or hiding? I couldn't ignore the coincidence. If Silas knew Jeb was alive, this ledger was a warning shot, a declaration. And if I delivered it, I'd be the messenger of his death. I sat for hours fighting myself. I had a route. I had a job. And in this land, men don't get second chances often, but Jeb had been more than a friend. He'd been a brother Dodd at dawn. I packed my things, threw the saddle over the horse, and changed direction. I'd heard a few whispers about an old trapper out near Split Rock with a scar down his jaw and a limp on his left side fit. Jeb's description. Better than I liked to admit. I was going to find out if he was alive, Dot, and if he was, I'd be damned if I let a red-inked book decide his fate. I took the south trail toward Split Rock, where the land opens wide like a dry wound. The air felt different out there, charged, unsettled. I kept the ledger tucked tight beneath my coat, but its weight dragged at me like I was wearing a badge made of guilt. 2 days out, I started to feel eyes on me. Shadows moved a little too quick. Crows flew too low. Every sound seemed louder than it should have been. Dot, by the third night, I'd convinced myself it was just nerves. Until a rider came out of the dark. She rode up with no warning, rifle across. Her lap, her hair long and tangled under a ragged bonnet. Her horse limped like it had run too hard for too long. She didn't say a word at first, just stared at me with hollow eyes, like she was trying to decide whether I was worth trusting or shooting. Finally she said, "You runnin' from Haywood too?" I almost lied. I almost told her I didn't know what she was talking about. But the way she looked, wild, half-starved, scared, beneath her grit, made something honest rise in me. "Maybe," I said. "I've got something he wants delivered." Her eyes flicked to my saddlebag. "Let him guess, leather-bound. Red seal, names inside." My mouth went dry. "You seen it?" She nodded, slow. "My husband's name was in there. James Lowry. He traded Silas a mule team once during the famine. Took 2 bushels of corn as payment. Next spring, Haywood's men came around, saying the trade was a theft. Shot James in the back while he was planting squash." She said it like she'd already cried all the tears she had. I swallowed hard. Why would Silas keep a ledger like that? Because he thinks he's owed something from every man still breathing. He's building his own kind of law, one written in blood and crossed names. We sat in silence for a while. Coyotes howled far off, like they were warning us. She introduced herself as May, told me she'd been following the Haywood riders ever since her husband was buried. Said she'd watched them burn a homestead 2 days south. Another crossed-out name, probably. "Silas doesn't want the law involved," she said. "He wants it bent. That Marshal you're riding to? He's old friends with Silas. That ledger won't end the killing, it'll justify it." The fire popped. Sparks danced into the darkness, like spirits fleeing the heat. I pulled the ledger from the saddlebag and opened it to the page with Jeb's name. Still there, still crossed. But now it felt like a death sentence waiting to be rubber-stamped. May looked over my shoulder. "You knew him?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "He saved my life once. I thought he was dead." May gave me a long look. "Then don't deliver that book." I felt torn clean down the middle. A part of me still clung to the rules, orders, contracts, law. But law out here was just whatever the man with the gun said it was. That night I made my choice, come morning. If I didn't get answers from Silas himself, I was going to burn that damn ledger to ash. We rode hard through the next day, May and I cutting east across the flats until the buttes loomed like broken teeth. I had no plan except to confront Silas face to face. I knew where he'd be. He'd mentioned riding north to handle arrangements. Turns out that meant Holbrook Ridge, where an old relay station still stood. Folks said he was using it as a waypoint for his riders. I left May with the horses and climbed the hill, alone. Silas sat at the edge of a fire, legs crossed like he was enjoying a Sunday sermon. Two of his hired men stood nearby tight-lipped, hands never far from their pistols. Silas looked up when he saw me, and his mouth curled like he was expecting me. "Knew you'd come back," he said. "Wasn't sure if you'd bring the ledger or not." "I read it," I said, pulling it from my coat. "Cover to cover." He didn't flinch, just nodded, like that was part of the plan all along. "I figured," he said. "That's why I picked you. You want me to deliver your revenge wrapped up as justice." Silas stood, brushing dust from his vest. "I want what's owed. During the famine, my family was left to starve while men we helped turned their backs. They stole, they lied, and when we begged for help, they laughed. My father died with nothing. My mother passed chewing leather for lack of food. That ledger? It's a reckoning." I felt sick. "You hired me to kill for you." "No," he said, stepping closer. "I hired you to deliver. Let the law handle the rest. But the Marshal is in your pocket," I snapped. "He'll see those names and do whatever you want," Silas shrugged. "That's the way the world works, son. You either write the laws or you live under 'em." I stared at the flames, thinking of Jeb, of May's husband, of the homestead burned in silence. "You know Jeb Hawkins is alive?" I said. For the first time, Silas's smile faded. "I knew you'd notice that name," he muttered. "You two were thick once. But even friends make mistakes. He took food meant for my kin. That's not something you come back from. He thought you were dead," I snapped. "We all did." Silas stepped closer, voice low and cold. "Doesn't change what he did. You can deliver that ledger or walk away. But if you walk away, my men will follow you. And if Jeb's still out there, I'll find him with or without your help." The wind picked up. Ash scattered through the campfire like ghosts. "I won't help you kill him," I said quietly. Silas turned back to the fire, calm as a preacher. "Then run, driver. Run and hope the law reaches him before I do." I walked away from that camp, with my jaw clenched tight, the ledger under my coat like a beating heart. May saw my face and didn't ask what was said. That night, I made a new plan. If I couldn't trust the Marshal, I'd at least warn him. Hand him the ledger myself, not as a message, but as evidence. If I played it right, I could turn Silas's own paper trail against him. I didn't know if it'd work. I'd rather die trying than live knowing I helped a man like that write history in blood. We waited until the moon climbed high and cold before slipping from our makeshift camp. May gave me a nod and stayed behind, said she'd draw them off if they caught wind. I didn't like it, but there wasn't time to argue. I cinched my saddle tight, stuffed the ledger deep into my duster, and spurred my horse into the darkness. I rode like the devil himself was at my heels. The trail to Dry Fork Junction twisted through gulches and dry creek beds, and I cut every corner I could. My horse stumbled more than once, and I knew we couldn't keep that pace forever, but I had to make the Marshal see. Had to get that ledger in his hands before Silas's men found me. But I was already too late. By the time I reached Ghost Ridge, I heard hoofbeats behind me, fast and furious. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford the fear. I leaned into the saddle and urged my horse on, lungs burning, vision blurring. Then the shots started. Cracks echoed through the canyon. Bullets kicked up dust near my boots. One whizzed past. My ear close enough I felt the heat of it. I veered left down a narrow ravine, hoping the tight path would slow them down. I didn't know how many were behind me. Could have been 3, could have been 10. Silas had no shortage of men, willing to kill for coin or cause or both. As the ground dropped and the shadows grew deeper, I knew I had a choice: ditch the ledger and hope they'd stop chasing, or hold on and see it through. I tightened my grip on the reins. I wasn't letting go. That ledger might have been ink and paper, but it was soaked with the truth. And if I let it fall into the wrong hands, all the blood spilt already would mean nothing. By first light, my horse was wheezing, legs trembling. We'd made it through the foothills, but barely. I saw smoke curling in the distant Dry Fork Junction. The Marshal's cabin sat on the far side of town, up on a bluff like it was watching over everything. I urged the horse one last time. We collapsed just shy of the steps. I stumbled up to the door and pounded with the last strength I had. It swung open, and Marshal Tannen stood there, older than I remembered, silver hair slicked back, mustache still sharp as his jaw. He narrowed his eyes, saw the dust, the blood, the book clutched in my hands. "Marshal," I gasped. "You need to read this, now." He didn't ask questions. Took the ledger from my hands and motioned me inside. I collapsed on the floor as he flipped through the pages, his face darkening with each name, each note in the margins. He paused on Jeb Hawkins, then on James Lowry. He shut the book with a push. Snap. "Where's Silas?" "Coming," I said, with men. The Marshal turned, opened a cabinet, and pulled out a Henry rifle. "Then we'd best be ready." Outside, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from hooves. The posse had arrived. The sound of boots and hooves shook the dirt outside the Marshal's cabin like a drum beat before battle. I peered through the window, heart jackhammering. Silas had brought at least 6 riders' rifles slung across their backs, dust still clinging to their coats. They weren't there to talk. Marshal Tannen stood at the doorway, the ledger in one hand, the Henry rifle in the other. He hadn't said much since reading it, but the tension in his jaw told me all I needed to know. He was as disturbed by it as I was. Silas rode up slow, like he had all the time in the world. His coat billowed behind him, black as tar. When he saw me through the window, he smirked like the devil catching sight of a sinner in church. "Marshal," he called out, "I believe you have something of mine." Tannen stepped forward, rifle resting across his arms. "This ledger?" "That ledger," Silas replied. "Personal property. Stolen by that man there." He pointed straight at me, not a trace of shame on his face. Tannen didn't move. "This ledger's full of names, not debts, not contracts. Names of men and women marked for death. Notes that sound more like confessions than business records." Silas chuckled. "Justice looks different to different men. My family was robbed blind during the famine. I've spent years picking up the pieces. That book is the only thing holding them accountable." "Accountable?" I barked from inside. "You've burned homes, shot people in the back. That ain't justice, it's revenge." Silas's gaze slid to me, eyes like glass knives. "You were paid to deliver, not to judge." Tannen raised his hand. "Enough? You come into my town, threaten my office, and bring armed men over a personal vendetta that ledger's evidence now. Not property." Silas's smile broke. "That so?" His hand moved. Too quick. Before I could shout, he whipped his pistol from its holster and fired. The bullet tore into the Marshal's shoulder, sending him stumbling back into the cabin. I dove to catch him as chaos exploded outside. Gunfire cracked like a storm. The Marshal groaned, blood pouring from his sleeve. I dragged him behind the desk, heart pounding like a drum in a coffin. "You'll have to hold them," he hissed, gritting his teeth. "Take the ledger. Don't let that bastard rewrite history." I grabbed the Henry rifle and the ledger, hands shaking. Outside, hooves thundered. I threw open the back door, bolted around the shed, and fired a shot into the air. "Drop your guns," I yelled, stepping out where they could all see me. "Or I'll burn it right here." Silas wheeled his horse around to face me. His men froze, hands twitching near their weapons. "You think that ledger's the only copy?" he sneered. "You think the names die just because the paper does?" I raised the book higher. "Maybe not, but I'll make sure every name in here sees daylight. Let the people decide if your justice is worth a damn." For the first time, his smirk cracked. Then came a voice from the edge of town. "You can start with mine." It was May. She rode in slow, rifle across her lap, eyes locked on Silas. Behind her, more folks emerged, farmers, blacksmiths, widows, all armed, all silent. The tide was turning. Silas looked around and saw, maybe for the first time, he was outnumbered. The crowd thickened like a storm cloud ranch, hands with axes, shopkeepers with old pistols, widows with hollow eyes and steady grips. They weren't soldiers, they weren't lawmen, but they were tired of fear. Silas dismounted slow, dust rising around his polished boots. He looked at each face, still gripping his pistol, jaw twitching. For once that silver tongue of his stayed still. Marshal Tannen stepped out of the cabin, arm in a sling, face pale but unshaken. The townsfolk parted for him like water. He looked. Silas dead in the eye. "You come into my town, shoot me, threaten these people, and now you want to claim this was all business?" Silas didn't blink. "I did what needed doing. My family was eaten alive while these people prospered." Murmur rolled through the crowd. Tannin held up the ledger. "This isn't justice. It's a hit list." Silas laughed bitterly. "And what's justice, Marshal? HM? Letting men steal corn while my mother starved in front of me? Letting Jeb Hawkins disappear with the last of our flour, smiling like we were fools?" I stepped forward, voice raw. "You don't know what happened. Jeb stayed behind to cover your escape. Took a bullet that night. We thought you were the one who ran." That shook him. His face twitched like something cracked inside. "You lie. I carried his coat for weeks. Found blood in the lining. He nearly died for you, and you crossed his name like a butcher." Tannen motioned to the gathered townsfolk. "We'll hold a public tribunal. Open statements. Testimonies. You want to speak your truth, fine. But the days of backdoor justice are done here." Silas hesitated, shoulders rising and falling like he was bracing for a fall. Then he spat in the dirt. "Fine. You want a trial. You'll get it, but I'll say what needs saying." They set up makeshift benches in the square. I stood next to May. We watched Silas pace like a preacher without a pulpit, trying to sway the crowd. He told them of the famine, of the nights he fed his sister bark and watched her waste away. He named names, pointed fingers, cried about betrayal. But something had shifted. The more he spoke, the more he revealed. He spoke of torching cabins, of taking back what was owed in blood, of hiring men to make examples. By the time he was done, the crowd was silent, not with sympathy, but horror. Tannen stepped forward. "Silas Haywood, by majority voice of this town, you're found guilty of conspiracy, murder, and the manipulation of law for personal revenge." Silas stared at the ground, then lifted his head slowly. "You think killing me will fix what's broken?" he said, voice like gravel. "You're wrong. There's rot in this soil. Always has been." Tannen looked at me. "We carry out sentence at sundown." Silas didn't protest. I think somewhere deep down he wanted it. Sundown fell like a curtain over Dry Fork Junction, painting the town in long shadows and burnt gold. The gallows had been unused for years, left to rot like so many forgotten promises, but the townsfolk worked silent and swift, hammering boards, tightening rope. Silas stood beneath the beam, wrists bound, eyes scanning the crowd like he was trying to memorize each face. He didn't flinch, didn't beg, just stood tall in his dark coat, shoulders squared, as if he was walking into a courtroom instead of a noose. I stood at the back, the ledger in my hands, heavy as ever. May stood beside me, jaw clenched. Tannen was on the platform, one arm in a sling, the other holding a worn slip of paper, the sentence, signed by the people. The marshal read it aloud, voice clear and even. "Silas Haywood, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers. Sentence, execution by hanging." The town held its breath. Silas didn't speak until the rope was slipped around his neck. Then he turned his head toward me. "You think you're better than me, driver?" he called out, voice echoing over the square. "You delivered my ledger anyway. You brought the flames. You think this rope changes what we are?" I didn't answer, because maybe he was right. Maybe I had delivered the reckoning, even if I hadn't meant to. The marshal gave the nod. The trapdoor groaned beneath Silas's boots, then cracked, open, but something snapped. Instead of a clean drop, the rope recoiled, snapped. Steel wires beneath the hemp unraveled and flung upward. Silas dropped to his knees on the platform, coughing, stunned but alive. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The marshal swore under his breath. He looked at the rope, then at Silas, then at me, Dot, and I saw it in his eyes, the twist of regret and mercy. He'd sabotaged the hanging. Silas was beaten. Stripped of power, name smeared, the town turned against him. But death? Maybe that was too easy. The marshal turned to the crowd. Prison, then. Let him rot with the rest of his ghosts. The townsfolk murmured, but no one objected. They'd seen enough blood for one lifetime. I watched them drag Silas away, wrists bound, shoulders hunched now. He didn't look back. Later, I found May outside the stable, staring westward toward the hills. I walked up beside her, the wind playing in her hair. She didn't speak. "I'm going to find Jeb," I sighed quietly. "If he's still out there." She turned to me, eyes soft, for the first time. "He deserves to know." We didn't say goodbye. Just stood there until the stars came out. The ledger, now closed, sat in my saddlebag. Not as a weapon anymore, but a witness, and me? I was just a driver, riding toward whatever came next with blood on my hands. Yes, but maybe something close to peace in my heart. Thanks for riding with Coyote's Campfire Tailies. Stay by the fire and pick your next story.